Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us for another rendition of the B&H Virtual Event Space. If you didn't know already, well, let me tell you, it is Night Photography Week here at B&H Photo. So really excited today. We've got a great presentation. We've got Andrei Duman, as well as, what's going on, Andrei? How you doing?
Good.
Awesome. As well as the never forgettable Mr. Pete Isgrig from SanDisk. What's going on, Pete?
How you doing? I'm good.
We miss you. I was just saying, and we were just talking about it in kind of the green room, if you will, you know, how it's been a little while since we've had Pete back on the channel over here. So we're really excited that you're back here today, Pete. Andrei is going to be talking a little bit about shooting the moon. So I want to say thanks a lot to Andrei for being here. I want to say thanks a lot to Pete, as well as SanDisk, for being our sponsors of this event. I'm going to get the heck out of the way because Pete is a seasoned pro over here and he knows what he's doing. So I'll hand the ball off to him. If there's anything that you want to get in as far as questions, you can go ahead and use the Zoom Q&A, or if you're joining us on YouTube, live stream, Facebook, you could drop a comment in there below and we'll get to them as they come. Please make sure to get them in because we love questions, comments. That's what we're here for. So Pete, take it away. The floor is yours.
All right. Well, thank you, Scott. Thank you, B&H, for having us. And welcome, everyone. Thanks for attending. Thanks for taking your time. My name is Pete Isgrig, and I am with Western Digital. And we are SanDisk Professional, WD Black, and formerly G Technology as well. So if you know any of those brands, we're all one and the same. G Technology is now become SanDisk Professional, and it's purely a brand name transition. So if you knew and loved G Tech, it's exactly the same. We're just throwing a different name on top of it to basically help it spread globally, where SanDisk has a very good brand reputation and people outside the USA know it. So Andrei will talk a little bit more about that because he's going to tell you about some of the SanDisk Professional products that are currently for sale. But we're here. If you have any questions, anything you want to know, like Scott said, put it into the Q&A. And throughout this whole presentation, I'm going to be asking your questions to Andrei, and we'll be facilitating a little bit of a conversation. He'll be showing you his work. He'll be showing you his project with the Hubble Telescope. And, we're happy to answer any questions, whether it's about his photography or whether it's about any of our storage products. And for those of you who are in the Zoom room, and I see that there are 16 of you, and I recognize some of these names. Hello, Elizabeth Murphy. So if you are in our Zoom room, we're actually going to be having a raffle for one of our SanDisk Professional SSDs at the end of the event. So if you aren't in the Zoom room, make it on over to the Zoom room before the end of this. The Zoom room info is on the B&H event invite and or on their event space website. And if you can make it into there, I'll be choosing a name at random from the Zoom room, and we will be raffling off one of our SSDs. And if any of you watching on the live stream, you can ask questions on the live stream as well. The B&H guys will be monitoring those and feeding me your questions as well. So with that said, I'd like to introduce Andrei Duman, all the way from California,
Yes.
joining us. And Andrei, if you'd like to share your screen, take it away and tell us a little bit about yourself first.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for the introduction, and thank you again to B&H and for Western Digital for allowing this. I think this is actually quite a unique way of showcasing some of the photography and focusing on the astrophotography. I've not seen that too much, which I think is fantastic to get a brand new set of people that are learning this very specific skill set, which is, as many of you know, very different to regular, your regular photography. Your settings are different and all that kind of stuff. But a little bit about myself. I am a Los Angeles-based commercial product and automotive photographer. I feel like I've had 15,000 lives because initially I started out as a professional tennis player, toured the world. That's what got my love into travel. My love into photography started from that as well. So I became initially a landscape photographer. Been very fortunate to have traveled to over 80 countries now. I think I'm at 83. which is amazing. And on this past year has kind of been a little bit stifling because usually I'll travel to 6 to 10 countries on a yearly basis. And unfortunately, I really didn't get on a flight. I just got back from Iceland. That was the only recent flight that I've done in a year and a half. So I'm sure this has been difficult for everyone to put a pause on that, but made that sort of transition from the aerial and landscape photography into the product and automotive side of things, which I thoroughly enjoy. And it's, again, very, very different in terms of the skill set and your composition, and sort of the way that you approach your photography is very, very different. So I'd like to give you a little sense of some of the stuff that I do. I can share my screen. And just a heads up, I really, actually, before I even do that, if I may, we've all been through 1,000 of these webinars, and the last thing I want to do is put my screen up for 50,000 hours and everyone can see it. Everything that I'm about to show you is on my website. So if anyone wants to see it, I'm sure there's going to be a link afterwards to see that in more detail. So I'm just going to run through them fairly quickly just to give you a sense of what I do. And if anyone has any questions, like Pete said, please ask away. But for the time being, this is a little bit about who I am and what I do. Can everyone see that?
Yep.
All righty. So let's do this. So like I mentioned, I'll start off with some of the automotive work that I've done. I've been really fortunate. I've had a chance to work with some amazing clients, McLaren being one of them. This particular car was shot actually right at the beginning of COVID. COVID was still kind of unraveling. It was, I think, in February of last year, or maybe it was end of January, where we had two incredibly rare cars. This is a P1 GTR. And the modifications that this particular client did, which shall remain nameless, he's quite a famous drummer in a band, but I will not mention their name. They spent close to $6.5 million for this car. The paint is it's kind of tough to see. You can sort of see it where the door is. There's two different paint tones. So there's a deeper orange and then a lighter orange. And also the P1 is not actually a street legal car, but this particular client made it street legal. So this car was about $6.5 million. And then this car is the Senna GTR. We shot it sort of the same day. We actually one for one day and one for another day, and then did some together as well. This one was $4.5 million. So a lot of money in that studio, but I really enjoy working with cars, not only in the studio, but also outdoors. My most recent shoot was with Aston Martin. This was a prototype car that they sent over to California for me to shoot. This was the DBX, right before it came out. And we took it on an airport runway deep in Mojave Desert to actually do some of the product photography for it. So that was kind of fun to do. And they also at the same time gave us a DBS Superleggera. So having two of these incredible cars on a runway that you can kind of put your foot down was a lot of fun. BMW also worked with them. This is the M8 competition as well as the regular car. This was done actually, again, right when COVID was sort of hitting. This was more towards the middle of end of February. Really small crew. We all got tested. I only had 2 assistants for this, and it was shot between midnight and 6 a.m. in downtown LA. So we had police escorts. We closed down all the roads. And that was actually kind of fun to block off sections by police cars and for us to sort of tool around with these things and just take photos with it. It was a lot of fun.
Andrei, what cameras and/or lenses and lighting and whatnot do you use for some of these? If you can briefly mention that, I know people always ask gear questions.
Yeah, I shoot exclusively on the Phase 1 system. So a lot of the images you're about to see were done on 151 megapixel back. It's the largest sensor and well, the largest, most expensive camera system that you can really get. But it's the quality of the file that really draws me to it. I'm fanatical about detail and noise and being able to shoot at low ISOs and still sort of and get that sort of crispness all the way through in the images. And in terms of lighting, we actually use no lights on this one or the ones outside. Obviously in the studio for this was quite extensive lighting. We had to light paint the car multiple times and then also focus stack it in all the different lighting positions that we did. So, you know, we would light, for example, just the rear spoiler, and we wouldn't necessarily worry too much about what's going on with the rims or the front of the car. We would still stack it, and then we would move the lighting around maybe to the door or the rims or another section of the car, and
those
we
are
would do
really
that.
long exposures then.
Not necessarily long exposures, because we had to focus stack it, which for those that are not familiar, it's very important when it comes to product photography, but also car as well. Being able to focus stack is, rather than using an aperture of f/22, which is going to lead to diffraction and all that kind of stuff, you want to be able to get multiple slices of focus at different focal lengths. So for example, I would start on focusing on just whatever's closest to me, and then find my far point, which is the furthest away from the camera, and then get those focus points and then stitch it all together in post. So having that ability to do it, which is amazing with the phase one, it's all built in camera. So I can choose my near, I choose my far, and it calculates for me, if I want to, how many images it's going to take for me to get that sharpness all the way through. So basically you set up your camera, you light the back, I focus stack one. I don't touch the camera again. We move the entire lighting setup, position it to where we want it to be, and then you stack it again. So you take different points of all these stacked images after they've been flattened to create one image. So these are multiple lighting across these cars, basically. So moving quickly on to some of the product work that I've done. This may be familiar to some people with the recent launch of, sorry, I had to put that in there, Pete. I do apologize. I couldn't resist.
Hey, it's your work.
Yeah. So SanDisk, I've been working with SanDisk for quite some time, and G-Tech obviously. And when they announced, and I've been very fortunate again, because I knew ahead of time of their plans, they had new products as well as making the announcements to, I don't know how you want to position it. You're not breaking away G-Tech, because obviously it's the exact same products. It's just moving it to a different umbrella. Is probably a better way.
Yeah, we're just transitioning it to a different parent company, just to sort of aid in brand recognition outside the United States. Nothing about the products changing. Everything inside exactly the same. Quality.
They'll even have the same
components, everything.
Yeah, everything's exactly the same. And they reached out to me with their dock, which you can see in the upper left of this section here. They gave me a working prototype that they had, and they obviously needed photography for it in conjunction with all the existing products that they already had. So this was a photo shoot that we did, and the images were used for the global launch of SanDisk Professional, which, there you go. That's one of the dock alongside one of the shuttles that you have there. So, and again, with product work, the lighting is really crucial to me. At the same time, personal projects are at this, during COVID, not being able to shoot as much, personal projects became something that was really important to me. And some people may have seen, or I've talked about this project previously when we did a webinar. Goodness me, that feels like a year ago.
I want to say December, maybe November.
Well, it feels like a year ago. I finished this project actually during COVID finally, because it took me about a year and 10 months to do, which was shooting these incredibly tiny insects that I partnered up and was provided these insects by the Natural History Museum of San Diego and the University of California. So basically focus stacking something that's around 6 or 7 millimeters and taking up to 8,000 images to be able to make sure that you have sharpness all the way through. So
I'm going to put a link for everybody for the exoskeleton project you did in the chat, because this is really, people, you need to really take a in-depth look at these, because these are super high quality. You can get really in-depth and really focused on just the detail of these insects that are, no bigger than like half your pinky finger, or your pinky nail.
Even less. So. And that's when I first started this project, I knew that I needed to custom make a section of my website to be able to allow a viewer. There's one thing to see it like this and understand sort of the size of it, but I really wanted them to be able to have the functionality to zoom in on certain sections. So if you go on my website, it is a custom built section whereby if you click a plus button, you can zoom way in to really see every tiny little hair that's on these insects and different sections of it. So that was the exoskeleton that I finished. One of the latest projects that I'm actually working on, and I'm kind of showing this for the first time because it's still not fully complete, but getting there. I had the opportunity to photograph some incredibly rare Kobe shoes, Nike Kobe shoes. And I've seen it done 1,000 times where people have photographed these shoes and they're wonderful and fantastic. And I wanted to do something a little bit different. I didn't want to sort of do the same generic. And it took me a while to kind of get a concept of it. And really what it ultimately came down to was I wanted the Nike ticks. And these are not CG'd, by the way. Nothing here is CG. These are actually, I printed over 200 of each individual color that you're about to see of the actual ticks that we then photographed separately and then comped in. So these are actually real ticks. So a lot of these were quite time consuming to photograph because again, you have to light the shoe properly, you have to focus stack them, and then you have to capture the ticks in midair and then sort of have them all comped in. So I will be releasing this when we have a video that we're working on right now. I'm actually shooting it on Thursday to complete it, but I wanted to give you a sense of the project and how it looks and how it feels. I wanted to sort of feel like they're floating with these ticks. Hopefully that's sort of coming across. But again, lighting is really crucial to me. Lighting and understanding what the product is and what the best, not just the best angle, but let's do something that maybe has not been done before. And that it usually is quite time consuming. One of my clients that I worked quite a bit in the past with was Richard Mille. And for those that are not familiar, they make incredibly expensive tourbillons and very, very limited. This particular one, the images for this were used to launch the watch. This was the Sylvester Stallone edition that he worked hand in hand with the developers, and it was around $1.2 million. And we had the security guard actually coming in, basically handcuffing the briefcase that was inside the studio. So. But again, focus stacking is absolutely crucial. And we spent close to 4 hours before we even took an image, just trying to figure out how we're going to light it, because there's just so much going on with this particular watch. You've got the bezel with the numbers, you've got the hands, all the inner workings of it. And then to overcomplicate it, you have the reflection up in the top. So getting all that, it was just, I remember it was a tremendously long day to be able to figure it out. And then obviously getting the back of it as well. But I love doing this kind of stuff. And then going on to watches, during COVID, this was actually my own watch. This was not, I just want to clarify, these were not for Apple. These were my own watches that I actually photographed. And again, were comped all together. What I found was you cannot, because of the flash that you're using when you're doing the product photography, it will completely blow out the screen. So that when you shoot it, the screen is actually black. Every single face that you see here had to be CG'd into the watch itself. So all of these that's not the way they appeared. But again, I wanted to have that sort of playfulness with the bands, playfulness with the colors that we're using, and do something a little bit different and kind of show it off in the best light possible. So in a nutshell, I'll stop right there. That gives you a little bit of a sense of some of the work that I do. If you want to see some of the aerial stuff, I included no aerial and none of my travel stuff, because again, that's just for someone that wants to go on the website and spend a little bit longer time. But to give you a sense, that's kind of what I've been working on, especially now that I can't travel and I couldn't really get up in planes and helicopters because of COVID. Really making that push on my end when it comes to the product work. And I'm lucky I have a home studio for me to be able to kind of tinker with. But yeah, I think it might be not the worst idea for us to sort of meander a little bit and go onto the project at hand, which is probably the one that we want to spend a little bit more time on, because this is pretty much why we're here, which is talking about this particular project I had about shooting the moon and how it really came about. So again, during COVID, I was looking for ways to keep myself motivated. I was looking for ways to try and remain creative and work on personal projects, just because again, the client work really dried up quite tremendously. But working on personal projects that, like I said, would allow me to still feel like I was keeping my brain sharp when it comes to some of the work that I want to do, and also learning a complete new skill set. I think that was something that was really important. It's not that I was necessarily getting bored, because obviously I don't get bored of photography, but I really felt like this was a part of photography that I didn't know a tremendous amount about, and I really wanted to sort of learn it on my own, sort of feet to the fire sort of situation. So I reached out over a year and a half ago, I reached out to quite a lot of organizations that had these telescopes. And my original idea was, I've never seen images of a medium format camera system to be placed on one of these telescopes, actually shooting through this telescope. I may have seen, and even then, very, very few opportunities. I may have seen someone using it on a personal telescope, one of the sort of consumer ones rather than necessarily a pro. And I thought to myself, why have I not seen something on through these gigantic telescopes that you see documentaries about? And I reached out and I threw it out there as an option, and I wanted to see who would bite from that situation. I reached out to even foreign countries, hoping that COVID was not going to last as long as it did. Obviously, it lasted a lot longer. And Mount Wilson were the one that responded, a few, along with some other ones. But Mount Wilson, obviously being a lot closer to me, made sense on multiple levels. For
Andrei,
a little bit of back, yeah.
Let me interrupt you there, because people always ask questions along the lines of, how did you reach out to these places? And did you just like Google search for telescopes and then reach out to the generic contacts on there? People always want to know how you drum up business or how you make these contacts.
I think a lot of times that's what you really need to do. And I had no idea where to start. So yeah, I Googled and I said, observatories are in Los Angeles, observatories in America, or observatories around the world. What's tricky is not necessarily finding those contacts, is, I guess drumming up the support or drumming up the courage to be able to say, hey, this is my idea. This is what I want to do. It's a little bit out there. You may not have had this before. Are you interested in potentially taking it on? So you just have to do it. There's no magic bullet to it. You can send, I remember I used to send 100 emails a day to not random, obviously, because it was selective, but to people for me to be able to work alongside them, or I liked their product and I wanted to see if there was something that we can collaborate on. And 99% of the time, you just don't hear back. And that's okay. You have to have a thick skin about it. Be persistent, but without being annoying. No one wants to get 50 emails a day saying, why are you not reaching back out to me? So sometimes you can just get lucky. And I feel like on this particular occasion, I just got lucky with it. I don't know if that really answers the question, but.
Oh, it does. Yeah. People are always asking how you drum up business or how you reach out or how you make contacts. And for a lot of times, it's really just finding the general contact information on a website that you Googled and then hoping that person responds and or forwards it to whomever, and then going from there.
Yeah, and for my commercial work, I'm very fortunate because I work with agents. So I have an agent that does that for me and sort of reaches out. Obviously, COVID has put a big dampener on that. But when it comes to personal work, and there are a lot, and I really enjoy doing the personal work because, to me, I think as a photographer, it's so crucial to continue to do personal work. You can have clients that want me to shoot cars and their products, and they give me direction and they give me the angles that they want. And in some ways, it's quite rigid. This is what you have to shoot. This is the way that we want it, and that's perfectly fine. That's it. They are the client. They're paying. I think the beauty when it comes to personal work is you have that flexibility. You have that freedom to say, I really want to do this, and there's a good chance no one's going to pay for it, right? Let's be perfectly honest, especially if the idea is a little bit out there. I want to do this because it's something I've always wanted to learn. I've always wanted to experience. And I can count 50 or 60 projects that I've done in the last 2 years that will never see the light of day. I tried them. They weren't good enough. The idea was good, but the execution didn't quite work, or the execution was right, but it just doesn't quite fit what I really wanted to do. And that's perfectly okay. You learn from that. And I've learned so much for even my exoskeleton project or some of the other failed ones that I'm now applying to something else, because without me doing those, I would have never learned about it. So I really, one thing that I like to stress to everyone is continue doing those personal projects. They are crucial for creative agents to see how experimental you are, how willing are you to try something new. So I highly encourage everyone to do that. Going back to the project, to Mount Wilson, there are a few challenges. One, first of all, just getting there. It takes about 2 hours from where I live. And it's way up on a crazy windy road and it's beautiful scenery, but you lose signal, and it's certainly a journey to try and make it out there. too. And the people that were absolutely wonderful to take this project on. And I think they tried to see my vision early on. What we quickly found was this has never been done before. We've never had a camera like the Phase 1 that has a much larger sensor. It's a much different beast to operate that has been put on these systems. They told me they had Canons and Nikons that they may have every now and again tried to see what they can get. But it just wasn't set up for a Phase 1 system. So that was quite honestly the thing that took the longest, was trying to really figure out, how are we going to do this? How are we exactly going to even attach before we can even start shooting it, how are we going to be able to attach it? So we quickly learned that the sensor size is too big. We tried to shoot through the eyepiece that they milled for me, and basically, and I'll show you in a second, the images that we were getting was just a huge circle with a massive amount of vignetting, which is fine, but I really wanted to get that large full sensor image. And to do that, we had to custom mill a separate piece, which again takes time. The first one didn't work. We had to mill it again to be able to get that full frame image. So I can share some of the images of what I'm talking about. If everyone could see that.
Yep.
So what's amazing about this particular location is in the astronomy world, these two telescopes, this is the 100-inch as well as the 60-inch. These two telescopes are probably the two most important telescopes, well, top three, I guess, in the history of telescopes. The first one was obviously Galileo, which is crucial, but it was on the 60-inch that is the blueprint for all other telescopes that have been made since the 20s and 30s. It was on the 60-inch as well as the 100-inch where Hubble did all his discoveries. It was this particular one where, the expansion of the universe was first discovered. And the way they did it was absolutely incredible. Obviously, the technology was nowhere near what we have now, but for them to take an image, it would take over 10 hours of a person sitting way up high. It's tough to describe, but you had to sit very high up to then be able to sit still for about 10 hours to expose that image. And you sort of get that sense of the place and the location. This is the underneath of it when you're sitting down into it. It is a gigantic piece of technology. I think the glass, which is in the bottom section, the large glass piece, is over 9,000 pounds. And we do have a video that we've done recently that sort of goes into more detail. Again, it's not up on my website, but it's just an absolutely incredible piece of technology. So it's quite daunting. It's like, where on earth am I going to stick my camera to be able to capture through this? There was a lot of hoops that we had to necessarily jump through. And this one is this is the 60-inch. Obviously, it's a lot smaller, but it is a little bit more manageable. The 100-inch has just such incredible resolution power that it can beat, if I remember correctly, I think it was 10 billion light years away, that it can tell, it can go so much far out in terms of the universe. So when you're in this location, you sort of get the sense of all these amazing astronomers, all these people that worked here before, and you get a sense of that history of what they were really trying to achieve here. And seeing these telephones, for example, there's 4 or 5 different generations of telephones that they're still actually in existence. The wire on the really old one right in the center kept dropping, and they didn't understand why it was always dropping between the two telescopes when they were trying to communicate. And apparently it was squirrels that were just biting through the wires. Some of these pieces are all originals. Some of the tools that they had were you still see the chairs that were being used from the 40s. So it's very nostalgic. It's an incredibly historically important location. But the beauty is, what do you get out of it? So multiple visits had to be done, obviously, just before we got to putting the camera on and making sure that it works. Once we did that, and that took quite a few months, is how do we then try and capture the moon? So trying to find the right time of, in terms of visibility, in terms of the atmosphere, making sure that there's no cloud coverage. it's just so many variables to try and get right. And many times that I went there, I had to turn back after a few hours. We waited a few hours and it was 1 in the morning or 2 in the morning, and we couldn't shoot at all because it just wasn't clearing up. So hundreds and hundreds of hours were spent throughout this project trying to get some of these images. Now, this particular one was actually shot on a 6-inch telescope. This was one of the early test ones that we did. So to give you a sense, the reason why I put this up is this is obviously an incredibly detailed image. You can, if you zoom all the way in, you can really see every individual crater, but this is sort of the size that you're getting. When you put it on the 60-inch, you're really getting into the craters. I mean, you can pick sort of 2 or 3 large craters, and you can, again, that resolution power is absolutely massive in terms of what it can really try and get. The exposures are very short. And that's why we started with the moon, quite frankly. We know where it is. We know that it's bright. We don't have to do these insane long exposures because of that brightness. So it was a good initial starting point with this particular project. And we want to go more.
In this image, do you have any sense of scale in terms of, like, say that crater at the bottom in the center there, do you have any sense of how big that crater is compared to what we're seeing here? Is it 1 mile long? Is it 100 miles wide?
That's actually a very good question. I will find that out. What I do know is that the scientists at the observatory told me that supposedly the highest resolution image taken of the moon was done by NASA on a 100 megapixel camera. And they calculated that, I believe, I have to double check this again, but I believe it was 10 meters per pixel was the resolution power that they could get. With my camera, with the 151, still putting it on the 60-inch, I'm now 7 meters. So I am even further closer in than what NASA was trying to do. I will get back to you in terms of actually the size of that. I do not
I'm just know. Curious, like looking at this image,
it's a very good question.
What are the size of some of these craters in terms of, because it could be really cool to say this is a 3-mile wide crater, or if it's a 300-mile wide crater or something. So
yeah, I will definitely have to get back to you on that one, because there is a way to calculate it. Obviously, we know the distance, we know the sensor size, so it can easily be calculated. What I do know is when I'm looking through the 60-inch and I can actually move it, and that's the reason why we took so many images, because I can control the telescope itself, moving it slightly left, right, and adjusting the focus. It just takes forever for me to go across the entire moon. So this is incredibly detailed in terms of the resolution power that we're getting on this. The one problem that we were having, and you can tell, I guess, on these images as opposed to this one, this looks like it's a lot sharper of an image than, let's say, this one. That's, again, finding that focus is really tough. The moon has a lot of atmosphere, and plus Mount Wilson was chosen for the right reasons why it was for the observatory to be built there, but it still has a lot of pollution that the telescope has to go through. So you really need to have a clear night. It needs to be, I was told it needs to be really, really warm and really, really muggy, so it doesn't have that vibration coming through from the winds. There's a lot of factors that you need to sort of fit in the right spot for you to get the right images. But the atmosphere of the moon itself is also very tough to gauge. Finding focus was incredibly tricky, because you do have an adjuster on the telescope itself that moves. There are 3 mirrors, so you can adjust some of the mirrors to move up and down. However, because of that atmosphere, it's very tough to judge when I'm way out of focus to slightly out of focus. It never quite always gets into sort of like that perfect focus, because it just keeps jumping, and that motion is called swimming. So there's a lot of swimming coming in on the telescope. So you have to just take as many images as you can and hope that you sort of nailed it. Like I said earlier, this was the first time we tried it on. This was the sort of effect that we're getting. So we're getting a huge vignette only because the eyepiece that was existing on the telescope was too small for my sensor. So we had to custom make it to be able to get to these sort of full sizes. These are not zoomed in images. These are the full resolution files. So those are sort of the crater sizes that we're able to see with the eyepiece. Now, the 100-inch is even more tricky, just because obviously that resolution power is even more. From what I'm told, and we tried it one time, but the custom piece that was built wasn't correct, so we have to wait. I'm actually going there in a week. You can choose a crater, and the 100-inch will fill the entire sensor. So that resolution power is absolutely massive on the 100. And I don't even know if the 60 is probably going to be a better way to go, just to give you that sense of scale. Hey, there's one crater here and there's a smaller one here, as opposed to the 100 that will literally put me inside one of the craters. So
did they give you any sense with the 100-inch? Can you get Mars or Venus or any of the planets?
You can,
or
so that's, yeah. So again, like I mentioned, the moon was fantastic to start with, just because it's large, it's bright, we know where it is. When I started working with them, Jupiter and Saturn were underneath us. So we actually had to wait. They're coming up in about a month. So I'm being told that with the 100-inch, we can fill Saturn, and we'll have to stitch Jupiter, because Jupiter is just so massive. But you can definitely fill Saturn in the entire frame and get all the rings, and then probably get the big eye on Jupiter to fill the frame.
Okay, so we're gonna have to do a part 2 of this conversation then, I guess, at the end of the year, sounds like.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to launch it with this just to sort of give a sense of what I'm working on. And again, the moon was just that much more accessible. But we tried with the 60-inch to get some of the nebulas. The difficulty with that is that you have to do a much longer exposure. So 10, 15 minutes exposures, and you have to stack them as well. We managed to get it, but it's just, I haven't quite focused enough time on it to perfect it. I really wanted to focus more on the moon to begin with. Okay. But as these planets are coming up, like I said, Saturn and Jupiter, I'm going up to test the 100-inch next week.
Yeah, I wonder if you can get the asteroid belt even, or any of that content, or those.
You can, and you can actually get Io, which is one of the moons. You can get it to, I think it's coming in at the perfect time that you can have it be like a tiny little dot in the entirety of Jupiter. So you can get the belts, you can get all the different, I don't know how much of the asteroids you'll be able to get individually, because we'll see how the atmosphere is and how much swimming there is. But this is not stopping here. This project is definitely ongoing. This was just sort of the initial start of my relationship with Mount Wilson and what we're trying to do, and for them to be able to use these images as well as the video that we've done for them to help promote the program, which they just recently opened up now with COVID. So that's a good thing, I guess, to keep the momentum going on what they're trying to do and raise some funds. But
right.
And I guess for the fear of promoting SanDisk, this is where SanDisk was absolutely crucial when it came to this project, because going there, it took 2 hours, a 4-hour round trip. I was there until 1 or 2 or 3 sometimes in the morning, shooting hundreds and hundreds of images a night. You needed to have something that was incredibly dependable and fast. These files are gigantic. They're 195 megs as a raw file. If you touch that into a TIFF, it turns into 900 megs for one individual image. So being able to shoot quickly as I'm panning around the moon without worrying that my data is getting lost and I may not be able to replicate this was something that was just absolutely crucial to be able to do.
What did you bring, like which of the products did you bring along, and what did you record on and back up on, etc.? Like how did you manage all of that while you were shooting and then transporting it home?
Yeah, so I was constantly tethered with the digital back to my laptop, and my laptop then had a cable going out to one of the shuttle drives. So I had an 8 terabyte SSD shuttle, again, just for that extra need of speed that was and reliability from that perspective, which was really crucial. Once we completed all the shooting for the evening, I would then transfer that entire data to I had my Armor Lock with me. So I needed to have it in 2 different places just to make sure I'm not losing it. What was really crucial was when we were shooting the video production that we did for Mount Wilson. Obviously, now we're shooting video. We had Red cameras and Leica Cineglass. That shooting in 6K was a tremendous amount of data that we were shooting. We did 2.5 days of yeah, 2.5 days of shooting, and we transferred, goodness me, it was close to 8 terabytes of data. I'm sorry, gigabytes of data. Gigabyte? Yeah. No, terabytes. Goodness me, losing my mind. So we needed to have multiple places where it was transferred and handed off to. I had my editor that came. We had a sound guy that was also there. So there was a lot of moving pieces that had to be all compiled together, put into one centralized storage space that I would physically hand off to my editor to do. So it was crucial to have that.
So we've got a question from Rob in the Zoom room. He wants to know what sort of budget, even if it's a guesstimate, would you be looking at for a project of this scale? And something along, I'll add to that because along these lines, people want to know how much of this did you cover yourself versus did you get, when you approach somebody to do a project for them or, in partnership with Mount Wilson, how much did they cover? How do you negotiate that? Or, what's what in that sense?
So with this project, I knew that this was a bit of a tall ask for the staff at Mount Wilson because of the duration of the project. This was not a one day shoot where I do something and then you never sort of see me again from that perspective. This was going to be months and months. I've been working with them now for just under a year. Multiple times they have to dedicate their time. So I knew early on that I couldn't, it just felt wrong for me to ask for a budget on their perspective. I wanted to provide the work for them to use. This was my way to help them if they wanted to use the imagery for their website or for their marketing purposes. So for me, it was more of a transfer of, if you could dedicate your time and your knowledge to be able to help me achieve something that, it really hasn't been done before, I'm more than happy to provide my work for you to then use. So this is probably a bad example in terms of the budgets. Just because I fell in love with it. I knew, like I said, I knew early on that I wanted to do a project like this, and I'm just fascinated by space, and I wanted to capture the moon in a way that maybe has never been done before. And again, always improving. They just told me that they found they figured out a new way of doing the eyepiece that we can try and find better focus going forward on the 100-inch. I don't know if that's going to work, but if it does, it's fantastic. So it's a constant learning. It's a constant experimentation. Many times I went there and again, we couldn't shoot. I had to turn right back around. So this was probably a bad idea. And also when it comes to personal projects, it's kind of tough to ask for budgets from my experience that I've seen. A lot of times you are approaching, and depends on the client too, but I'm approaching a particular client that is, maybe doesn't want to necessarily be bothered. You need to give them something rather than say, hey, give me $10,000 and I'll get you X, whatever it is. I find that tough on personal projects. When it comes to client work, where you have your agent or someone else searching on your behalf, that's a little bit different. But for this one, I wanted to really help the observatory.
Okay. We got another question from Bill Davidson on the YouTube stream. Do you ever worry about losing data on your SSD drive over time versus old school spinning drives? And Andrei, I'll let you answer this first because I have an answer.
I know you have your answer,
but I think yours might be a little bit more valuable, or at least more meaningful anyway.
Truthfully, look, I've had non-SSDs and I've had SSDs. I've never had an SSD fail. And for as long as I've been doing this, which has been over close to 18 years now, I've only had 2 drives fail. So are drives perfect? No. Some may fail. However, SSDs obviously come with a few more advantages. There's no spinning disk. There's much faster transfer rates. It feels like a much safer, more robust system. So I prefer to use, as much as I can, as much as budget allows, I prefer to use SSDs. That's why I have my armor locks, which again, if you want to talk about how great they are in terms of how I can control them with my phone, and I can choose who opens them and how, using the SSDs is the way for me to go. Only because, again, with certain projects that I do, I just won't be able to necessarily shoot that again. So it's just absolutely crucial that I back them up in at least 2 locations, at least. Even when I went home, I have an entire section of everything that I've shot at Mount Wilson, and I put it on an armor lock and I put it away in my safe that I don't touch. So I always know, no matter what happens, hopefully, knock on wood, if the house falls down, my safe should be safe. But
Yep.
I would prefer SSDs.
Yep. I mean, you basically said what I was going to say. The only thing I wanted to add to that was that there is a limited lifespan for SSDs. There's a limited amount of read-write times that you can do it. So at some point they will fail in that you can't write to them anymore. You can always read from them usually. So, you know, be aware of that. But for most SSDs, especially on like our SanDisk Professional side, I think it's something like if you read and wrote to the entire capacity of the drive every single day for like 5 years or more or something, you would still not, you know, kill that SSD. But one thing a lot of people don't, you know, that the main benefit, if you're traveling a lot with data, SSDs are beneficial because even if you're not dropping that spinning hard drive or it's falling, if it's just moving up and down, if it's just bouncing around, even if it's well padded, you still can damage the components inside of it. So, you know, SSDs don't have those moving parts. They don't have those platters, those needles. So it's very hard to lose data on an SSD. And most of our SanDisk Professional SSDs, they have 1,000-pound crush-proof enclosure. So, you know, if it gets run over by a small car, you're really not going to damage that drive even there. So, you know, it's very
and
easy.
one more thing on the back of that, because you touched on it lightly, which is for myself, my editor doesn't live in the state. My retoucher lives somewhere else. I need to ship them these drives. So by having the SSD, like you were saying, in terms of padding, and then, you know, if it gets, all you need is to put all your data there, even if it's password protected and a courier just drops it, there is a chance that you're gonna cause some damage and it won't be able to read. Whereas with an SSD, I know every single time that I ship something, I know that there's not going to have any problems whatsoever. So that, from that perspective, for me,
and still always have a backup. Always have 2 backups if you can.
Absolutely.
Always try to have a cloud backup as a third option if you can as well, because nothing is foolproof. And even if you have an SSD, it can get lost in shipping. Your suitcase can get lost wherever when you're traveling to. So you can leave it in a backpack and leave your backpack on, you know, a bus or wherever, you know. So just always back up, always have a second option regardless.
I actually have some drives that I've given to my my assistants, just so when we're done with the job, I have my one, they have their one as well. And then once I've copied everything over and I have it in multiple places, that's when I tell them, hey, you can delete it so you don't have to keep it.
Yep, that's sort of how we say
data management is crucial.
Cloud backup. We tell people get another hard drive and ship it to, you know, a relative that lives out of state, so that you have another option that's somewhere else.
I have a full drive at my in-laws. If anything collapses or anything fails.
A hard drive actually that is I'm technically upstate visiting my parents for the week, and I have a hard drive that is sitting next to me that is my computer hard drive at my home in New York City. So yep.
It's
all right. So we got a question from Amy. First of all, she says that, you know, she thinks your photos are amazing and her mind is blown. Andre,
thank you, Amy. I appreciate that.
And Andre, you might have some insight, but she's given me an opportunity to do a quick plug. But she's basically asking about SanDisk UHS-2 memory cards and micro SD cards in her new X-T4 camera. And Amy, first of all, I'll say, yeah, UHS-1 and UHS-2 memory cards will work just fine in that camera. It's all about what speed you need. UHS-2 cards, unless you're shooting really high definition video or you're doing, you know, multiple burst shooting, probably you can get away, save some money on a UHS-1 card instead. But both will work just fine. You asked about using micro SD cards, and you pointed out one thing I tell photographers not to do. In these full-size SD card slots, never use a micro SD card in that little plastic adapter that it comes with in a full-size SD card slot size. Basically because those little pieces are really just poorly designed plastic, and they're not designed to handle the data throughput that a camera will put on a card. You will get some data corruption if you use a micro SD card in that adapter in a full-size slot. So only look to the full-size UHS-2 or 1 SD cards. But Amy, one thing, and anybody else listening, this Friday, or not this Friday, in 2 weeks Friday, what is it? No, Thursday, sorry. Thursday, the 26th of August. I am doing a trivia tips and tricks night where I will talk about more things like this. It's hard drive week at B&H, and I'm hosting an event where I'm going to be talking about tips and tricks, especially for the newbie as it relates to photography and data storage. So if you want to know more about best practices, how to use memory cards, hard drives, SSDs, and what not to do, come sign up for that event. It's on B&H's website. Again, August 26th. It's called Trivia Night. It's going to be me hosting it, and you're going to learn. It's going to be questions along the same lines of what you just asked, Amy. So if you want to learn more about all of our solutions, I would say come to that event, and you'll learn everything you didn't know you needed to know about memory cards and hard drives.
And one more thing about Amy's point, and for anyone else that's listening, it really depends on how is she shooting? Is she shooting RAW? Are you shooting JPEG? If you're shooting JPEG, obviously that compression is just going to make the files a lot smaller. You can shoot a lot faster. If you're shooting RAW, that's when you're going to need much faster transfer rates, which is the H2s. And same for video too. Are you shooting it in 4K? Are you shooting it just in regular 720? Or what the format that you're choosing in your camera is going to massively dictate what size and speed you need for your memory cards.
Yep.
And for your hard drives too. I mean, your portable ones. Do you want to be there an entire day transferring data, or do you want to be there? I mean, the Mobile Pro SSDs are still, to me, the one product that is absolutely blowing my mind, because it's 2800 download speed. I can have something done. It still blows my mind every time I try and transfer something, 200, 300 images on a phase. It can be done in 3 minutes. It's absolutely, it's my one drive that I would never be without, is my Mobile Pro SSD.
Good. I love hearing that.
Yeah, they're absolutely
incredible. So I'm going to go ahead and do the raffle for those of you in the Zoom room. But as I'm doing this, because we usually need a minute or two for the person to be able to give their email address to me into the panelist chat. So as we wait for that, I'm going to say, if you have any last questions, we're approaching our hour. So if you have any last questions, please put them in the Q&A now, or Danny, if you want to check out any of the comments in any of the live streams, we will answer those as well. So get those in now. And as we're doing that, I put all your names in the Zoom room here. There's 24 of you, so your odds are very good. Put you into an Excel file and just
Am I in there? Can you put me in there too?
You are not in it, sadly, but I send you whatever free drives you want, so you can't complain.
I'm not complaining.
So the winner that is selected for this is Albert Tan. So Albert, congratulations.
Congrats.
What we need you to do, Albert, is go into Scott, correct me if I'm wrong here. I think they go into the chat, and then they can send a message to panelists only, and they can, Albert, you got to put your email address into it. And then that way I need to email you and get your mailing address to ship you this SSD. So if you can.
Correct. I'm gonna message you, Albert, right now, and then if you make sure that it's just to the panelists, that will make sure that you only share your email address with us.
He put it into the Zoom chat, so I think I got it real quick before hopefully anybody copied it down and spammed him or whatnot. But I got his email address now, so we are good to go in that sense. So congratulations, Albert. You'll get an email from me in just a minute. Are there any last questions, Danny? I don't see any more in the Q&A.
And if anyone has any questions, by the way, that you can think of afterwards, in an hour, in 3 days, just shoot me an email. I'm happy to take a phone call if needed. But if you have any questions, definitely reach out to me. All my details are on my website.
Oh, yeah. And that also reminded me that I always, at the end of these sessions, I always give out my contact information as well. So if you're in the Zoom room, I put my email in there. And for those of you on the live stream, you can copy this down. I don't have an easy way to get it to you. Or Danny, can you throw it into the chat there? But it's pete.isgrig@wdc.com. That's ISGRIGG@wdc.com. So it's pete.isgrig@wdc.com. So if you have any questions about products, any customer service issues, any technical issues, you don't know what to buy, you don't know what the right product is for you, please don't hesitate to reach out, to email me. I'm more than happy to answer any questions and help you out in any way that I can. The B&H staff is also very knowledgeable. You can call up their people, you can chat their people, you can go in store again now. They have dedicated hard drive and SSD storage gurus that can answer lots of questions well above and beyond the standard, what is the technical specs of this drive conversation. So they can definitely help you out in any way that you need.
And the new SanDisk Professional section of the website is massively improved with a lot of information on that too. So I highly recommend people go and check that out.
And we will be getting Andrei's video on this whole Hubble Telescope project up there on that page, hopefully in the next week or so. So do check back on our SanDisk Professional page on the B&H site as well, and hopefully you'll see that shortly.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to pop back in. I'm going to let people see my face, even though I know nobody's really excited about that. But here I am. So you're stuck with me for at least the next 2 minutes. But I definitely want to go ahead and extend a thank you as well to Andrei for joining us here and spending the last hour sharing a little bit in your knowledge and your expertise. We really appreciate that. That's what makes the virtual event space so wonderful, is people, creatives, artists getting together and sharing their knowledge with everybody else, and having an opportunity to hear everybody's story. So thank you very much, Andrei. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's absolutely our pleasure. I want to give a huge thanks to Pete as well. Pete, my buddy, I always love having you here. We go back a long way, all the way back to the store days, right? When we were working in the store. So always good to at least see you virtually, Pete. And definitely a huge thank you to SanDisk as well for being a great partner and sponsor of these events. So we really appreciate the SanDisk partnership as well. And last but not least, always what I consider to be the most important people to thank are you guys, the viewers, the people who tune in and allow us to do all this great stuff that we enjoy on our end. You let us do this every single day. So we're extremely grateful and give gratitude to you all as well for joining us here, submitting your questions, your comments. All of that stuff is really helpful and meaningful and allows us to thrive in the virtual event space. So keep them coming. I can guarantee we've got a ton of great content coming for the remainder of the week for night photography. And if night photography is not your thing, don't worry. Like Pete said, we're going to have hard drive week soon. And so get excited about that. We'll be talking about a ton of hard drive stuff. So maybe that's your thing. But either way, we got something for everybody. At least we hope we do. If there's something that you want us to cover that we haven't covered, drop us a line. Let us know, shoot us a comment, get a message in there, and, we'll take a look and we'll see what we could set up and we could do for you. Otherwise, that's it for tonight. We really appreciate everybody. Andrei, Pete, SanDisk, viewers, this has been another rendition of the B&H Virtual Event Space. We'll catch you next time.
Thank you so much.